Have you ever wondered what it would be like to wake up one day and realize that everything you have amounts to nothing but debts, overdue bills, and a nearly extinguished hope? Have you imagined what it feels like to look in the mirror and sense that your entire life has slipped through your fingers, as if nothing you've done until now had any meaning? Is it possible to emerge from a state of total scarcity when it seems as though the entire universe has conspired against you? And even more, is there something capable of transforming not only your external circumstances, but also your worldview, your relationship with yourself, and even the way life responds to you? These were the questions that, without even knowing it, a man named Michael Lawson had to face. Michael was no different from millions of people around the world. He was an ordinary black man, full of dreams that once seemed attainable, but which, over time, were suffocated by life's pressures, a lack of opportunities, and the crushing weight of reality. Looking back today, it is hard to believe that the same man who once had nothing, who felt trapped in an endless cycle of failure, now lives the life he always desired, surrounded by abundance in every area. But before understanding how he got there, we need to go back to the beginning, to the time when his life seemed to be falling apart completely. At that time, Michael lived in a small apartment in a modest neighborhood, the kind of place where peeling walls and worn-out carpets told a story of struggle and survival. Rent was overdue, the refrigerator was almost always empty, and the electricity bills threatened to be cut off at any moment. Every morning, he woke up with a heavy weight in his chest, as if the simple act of opening his eyes was a battle. The silence of the room was not just the absence of sound, but a constant reminder that he was alone, with no one believing in him, with no support network to sustain him when his own strength failed. Michael had grown up believing that if he worked hard, he could achieve anything he wanted. This was the lesson his father tirelessly repeated. "Nothing comes easy, son, but if you put in the effort, the world will recognize your worth." For a while, he believed it. He finished his studies, found temporary jobs, tried different paths. But it seemed that no matter how hard he tried, recognition never came. On the contrary, the doors he knocked on closed one after another, as if an invisible barrier prevented any progress. Things worsened when he lost his job at a logistics office, the last thread of stability holding his life together. He had no savings, no reserves, and within weeks he began relying on small, informal jobs to survive. The humiliation of not being able to pay the bills on time ate away at his spirit. More than once, he had to ask friends and relatives for help, but their responses, always full of excuses, made it clear that no one was willing to carry that burden with him. And little by little, Michael began to believe he was too alone to dream. The nights were even harder. Lying on a worn-out mattress, he stared at the ceiling for hours, listening to the distant sound of traffic mixed with the hum of a nearly burned-out light bulb. It was in these moments of silence that the cruelest thoughts surfaced. Why does nothing ever work out for me? What did I do wrong? Will my whole life be like this? The pain was not just in the lack of money or material deprivation, but in the loss of hope. Each passing day made the flame that once made him believe in a better future dim a little more. Still, there was a soft, almost imperceptible voice inside him that did not let him give up entirely. Perhaps it was only a remnant of his mother's teachings, who always said, "The universe never closes all doors at the same time." Perhaps it was the stubbornness of someone who, even in the face of darkness, refused to believe that this was the end of the line. But this voice, small and fragile as it was the only thing that kept him standing on the days when everything seemed to crumble. There were moments when Michael walked through the streets of the city and observed the people around him. He saw luxury cars passing by, happy couples in cafes, men and women leaving elegant offices with confident expressions. And inevitably, he compared himself to them. Why can they and I can't? What is missing in me that they have? This constant comparison only increased his suffering, but at the same time, it planted a seed. If it was possible for them, why couldn't it be possible for him too? What Michael didn't know at that moment was that the answer to this question was not in working twice as hard, sacrificing more, or punishing himself for failures. The answer lay in something that still seemed distant, but that would soon cross his path: a new way of seeing life, of relating to his own thoughts, and of attracting what he desired. But before that happened, he would need to traverse the desert of scarcity, feel every scar of pain on his skin until he was ready to make space for the new. It was during this period that he began writing in an old notebook, almost like a diary. They were not beautiful or organized texts, but outpourings full of pain. There he poured out his deepest fears, frustrations, and even his anger. Sometimes the pages were stained with tears that fell without him noticing. This habit, though painful, began to give him a small clarity. By putting his feelings on paper, Michael started to realize how trapped he was in a narrative of defeat. Everything he repeated to himself, consciously or unconsciously, confirmed that there was no way out. This was the point when his life quietly began to change, not because anything magical had happened yet, but because he was about to become aware of the power that his own words and thoughts carried. The universe somehow seemed to wait for him to reach this limit, this bottom, to finally reveal a different path. A path he would never have considered if not for the desperation that pushed him. Michael didn't know it yet, but he was about to discover something that would transform not only his financial reality, but every aspect of his life. He was about to learn about the law of attraction, although at that moment the term was completely unknown to him.
Have you ever felt so trapped in a situation that imagining a way out seemed impossible? Have you ever gone through a time when life seemed like an endless sequence of closed doors, as if the entire universe had decided to tell you no? That was exactly the place where Michael Lawson found himself. After losing the job that still provided some stability, the days dragged on like a marathon of invisible obstacles. Each morning began with the same feeling, a weight on his chest, as if something unseen but intensely felt was crushing him. The simple act of getting out of bed required energy he no longer had. The first minutes of the day were marked by cruel doubt. Why bother waking up if nothing will change? The small apartment he lived in had become almost an emotional prison. The dripping faucet, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the yellowed, sad light of the bulb, everything reflected his inner state. The piled-up bills on the table were like silent monsters, constantly reminding him of what he owed. Each envelope from a service company was a threat, a reminder that he could lose even the little he still had. The phone rang from time to time, and just seeing unknown numbers made his heart race. He knew they were collectors. He knew he had no answers to give. The days repeated in a cruel cycle, searching for temporary work, sending resumes, hearing negative responses, or often hearing nothing at all. The silence from the companies he applied to was even more painful than the direct no's. It was as if he were invisible, as if his life had no value to the world outside. And in the moments he managed to find small gigs, carrying boxes, painting walls, making deliveries, the money barely covered food. Often dinner was just a plate of rice and beans, and sometimes not even that. The sense of failing as a man, as a human being, corroded his self-esteem. He remembered his parents and the expectations they once placed on him, and shame suffocated him. If they could see me now, what would they think of me? He asked himself. It was during this period that Michael reached the lowest point of his life. One cold winter night marked the peak of his pain. He returned from an exhausting informal job, carrying boxes until late, and upon arriving home found a notice on his apartment door, an eviction warning if he didn't pay the overdue rent. He sat on the floor, paper in hand, feeling as if the world had completely collapsed. He cried like he hadn't since childhood. He cried until he had no strength left. The loneliness of that moment was unbearable, and the feeling of defeat seemed final. But that very night, at the height of despair, something unexpected happened. Without knowing exactly why, he turned on the television, just to try to distract his mind from the chaos around him. A late-night program was airing interviews, and one guest spoke about the power of the mind and how our thoughts shape reality. Michael at first thought it was absurd. "What do you mean thoughts create reality? If that were true, I'd be a millionaire by now," he muttered. But somehow those words kept echoing in his mind. In the following days, he began noticing small signs. In a used bookstore he often visited just to pass the time, he found a dusty book on a hidden shelf. The title caught his attention. It was about energy, frequency, and how to attract what you desire. He picked up the book, read a few pages, and felt a shiver. He had no money to buy it, but the store owner, a friendly elderly man, noticed his interest and said, "Take it, young man. This book hasn't left this shelf in years. Maybe it's waiting for you." Michael took the book home, almost as receiving an unexpected gift. That night, lying on his worn-out mattress, he began to read. The words sounded strange at first, as if they belonged to a world far removed from his reality. But as he read on, something began to change. The book spoke about the importance of gratitude, visualizing the life you desire, and aligning your thoughts with what you want to attract. He didn't understand how all this could work in practice, but a spark of hope began to emerge. For the first time in a long while, he felt that perhaps there was a way out. Still, the internal struggle was immense. While reading about prosperity, abundance, and transformation, he looked around and saw only debt, poverty, and failure. His logical mind said, "This is nonsense, nothing will change." But there was another voice, that soft voice that never abandoned him, whispering, "What if it's true? What if? Just try, just try." It was in this internal conflict that Michael spent the following weeks. During the day, he still chased small jobs and faced the judging looks of those who saw him as a defeated man. But at night, he read a few more pages of the book and began subtly experimenting with some practices. For a few minutes, he would imagine himself living a different life. He closed his eyes and visualized a full table, new clothes, a welcoming home. Sometimes he felt ridiculous doing this, but curiously, he also felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in a long time. One of the first exercises he allowed himself to do was to write in his journal not only about his pains, but also about things he could be grateful for. At first, it seemed impossible to list anything positive, but forcing himself, he wrote, "I have a roof over my head, even threatened. I have food, even little. I have health. I have the strength to keep trying." It was a simple, almost insignificant gesture, but it planted a seed of change. The bottom was still there, and Michael still faced dark days, but something inside him began to move. It was as if a new door were opening, a door he would never have found if he had not gone through the darkness. And although he didn't know it yet, that forgotten book on a dusty shelf would be the first step toward the complete transformation of his life.
Have you ever felt that, all of a sudden, little things started happening around you, as if the universe were trying to send you signs? Have you noticed that when you change a thought or an attitude, life seems to respond differently, even if subtly? That's exactly what Michael Lawson began to experience, even without fully understanding what was happening. The book he had found in the bookstore became his daily companion. Every night, after returning exhausted from his small temporary jobs, he would lie on his mattress and open those pages, already yellowed with time. The content was not only inspiring but also challenging. It said that thoughts shape reality, that what you focus on grows, and that gratitude opens invisible doors. Michael read those phrases countless times, trying to absorb their deepest meaning. At first, his mind resisted. He was so accustomed to pain, difficulties, and scarcity that it seemed impossible to believe that something as simple as thinking differently could change everything. "How can I be grateful for something I don't have? How can I believe in abundance when I can barely pay the rent?" he whispered. But at the same time, something inside him said, "What if it really works? What if you just try?" And so, timidly, he began to practice. Every morning, before getting out of bed, he would close his eyes for a few minutes and force himself to imagine a better day. He visualized waking up in a comfortable house, having breakfast at a full table, wearing new clothes. At first, the image was blurry and hard to sustain, but over time, he began to feel a faint emotion arise, almost as if that reality already existed somewhere. The most challenging exercise, however, was gratitude. The book suggested that he write down things he was grateful for every day. The first time, he stared at the blank page for long minutes. His mind insisted on listing only what was missing. But, taking a deep breath, he wrote, "I am grateful to be alive. I am grateful to have the strength to try again. I am grateful for this notebook and the ability to write." It seemed little, but it was enough to begin. Gradually, his gratitude list grew. He began noticing small things that had previously gone unnoticed: the smile of a child on the street, the warmth of a cheap cup of coffee on a cold day, the kindness of a stranger holding the door for him. They were simple details, but when recognized, they seemed to bring new energy. And that is exactly what happened. The energy began to change. He still didn't have enough money and still faced problems, but he noticed that something inside him was different. The weight on his chest, once constant, began to give way to moments of lightness. The despair that had made him cry for nights on end was slowly replaced by cautious hope. And curiously, his external circumstances also began to respond. The first sign came unexpectedly. A former colleague with whom he had lost contact called offering a small freelance job. It wasn't much, but it paid better than the odd jobs he had been doing. Michael accepted immediately. When he received the payment, he realized that for the first time in months, he wouldn't have to choose between eating and paying part of the bills. It was as if the universe had given him a breath of relief. Days later, another sign appeared. He was walking down the street when he found a $20 bill on the ground. He stopped, looked around to see if someone had lost it, but no one was nearby. He picked it up, and instead of thinking it was mere luck, he remembered what he had read in the book. The universe responds to your energy. For the first time, he believed this could be a confirmation that he was on the right path. These small events might have seemed insignificant to anyone else, but to Michael, they were miracles. They were proof that something was changing, that life might not just be a sequence of misfortunes. He began to smile more, to walk through the streets with a different posture. People noticed. Some acquaintances commented, "You look better. What changed?" He only responded with a shy smile, as he still didn't know how to explain. It was during this period that Michael decided to deepen his practice. He began meditating every morning, even if only for a few minutes. He would sit in silence, take deep breaths, and try to quiet his mind. Often, thoughts of fear and worry came with force, but he remembered the instructions. Don't fight them, just return your focus to what you desire. Gradually, he managed to create a space of peace within himself, even if temporary. Another practice he adopted was affirmations. He wrote phrases such as, "I am worthy of prosperity," "Abundance flows to me," "My life is changing for the better." At first, he felt ridiculous, almost as if he were lying to himself. But over time, he realized that these words began to create new sensations. It was as if he were reprogramming his mind, replacing old beliefs of scarcity with a new vision of possibilities. The transformation was still subtle, but real. Michael began noticing opportunities he had previously ignored. A flyer on the street offering a free personal finance course caught his attention. He decided to attend, and there he learned simple concepts that helped him organize the little money he had. This small change brought him a new sense of control over his life. Another remarkable moment occurred when, during a conversation with the bookstore owner where he had found the book, he received unexpected advice. "Young man, life always responds to what you believe is possible. If you believe nothing can change, nothing changes. But if you believe something is possible, you open the door for a miracle to enter. Weeks passed, and Michael realized his life was no longer the same. He was not yet living in abundance, he still had debts, and he still faced difficult days. But something essential had changed. He no longer felt like a powerless victim. Now he had tools, practices, and hope. More than that, he had the sense that the universe was listening. And deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. The small signs he had been receiving were like flashes of light in the darkness. They were invitations to believe more, to persist, to continue aligning his energy. The man who, weeks ago, cried alone over an eviction notice was now beginning to see the possibility of a different future. The bottom of the pit had been painful, but it was from there that the strength for his transformation emerged. Michael still didn't know where this path would lead, but for the first time in a long while, he was willing to trust.
Days turned into weeks, and Michael began noticing something curious. His life was being guided by subtle signs, as if the universe were leading him step by step. One morning, while walking to the neighborhood bakery, he found an old coin on the ground. It wasn't the monetary value that mattered, but the symbol. Michael interpreted it as a reminder of unexpected abundance. He smiled, silently gave thanks, and continued, feeling that something greater was in motion. That same week, a longtime friend he hadn't seen in years reached out unexpectedly. During the conversation, Michael spoke about his dreams and how he had been practicing gratitude and visualization. The friend, impressed with the new energy radiating from him, recommended a job opportunity that seemed tailor-made. For the first time in a long while, Michael felt the weight of the past lifting. He began noticing subtle transformations within himself as well. His mood was lighter, his conversations more inspiring. People noticed a new spark in his eyes, attracting new connections. What was once loneliness now became meaningful encounters, as if the universe were responding to his new vibrational pattern. One quiet night, sitting on his porch, Michael reflected on how it had all begun with a simple act of gratitude. He realized that the law of attraction wasn't just about wishing for something, but about aligning thoughts, feelings, and actions in harmony. The secret was to believe even before seeing. The transformation was not only around him, but within him. Michael was no longer the man who felt lost, erased by circumstances. He now walked with confidence, convinced that life would always conspire in his favor, as long as he maintained his faith, clarity, and unwavering gratitude.
The changes in Michael Lawson's life began to manifest in increasingly concrete and surprising ways. The job opportunity his friend had suggested turned out to be more promising than he had imagined. It was a creative project at an innovative company, exactly in the field he had always dreamed of working in, yet until then had seemed unattainable. At first, Michael was hesitant, doubting whether he was truly ready. But remembering his practices of gratitude and visualization, he chose to act with courage, believing that the universe would not have placed this opportunity in his path by chance. During the interview, he felt something different. It wasn't just his experience that impressed the recruiters, but the confident and serene energy he radiated. He spoke with conviction, smiled authentically, and conveyed genuine enthusiasm. Days later, he received the news that would change his course. He had been hired. Upon hearing those words, Michael took a deep breath, as if he were finally stepping through the door he had always dreamed of opening. But the transformation didn't stop there. With the new job came new friendships, connections, and a sense of belonging. He no longer felt like a spectator in life, but the protagonist of his own story. His days gained rhythm, purpose, and meaning. The emptiness that once dominated his nights was replaced by plans, learning, and ever-growing dreams. And as if the universe were affirming his path, small miracles continued to happen. Bills he didn't know how to pay were resolved unexpectedly. Projects that had seemed stuck flowed easily. Even his physical health improved. He slept better, had more energy, and his body seemed to keep pace with the inner transformation. One night, lying in bed, Michael smiled as he looked at the ceiling. He remembered the man he had been months ago, lost, discouraged, and hopeless. Now he felt alive, renewed, and full of gratitude. The law of attraction had ceased to be a distant theory and had become his daily reality. And deep in his heart, he knew this was only the beginning. Michael Lawson had never felt so alive. It was as if the weight he had carried for so many years had dissolved into something light and inspiring. The new job was not just a source of income. It was a creative space where he could express his essence, showcase his talents, and truly contribute. Every task, every meeting, every shared idea seemed like confirmation that he was exactly where he was meant to be. But deep down, Michael knew this was just the first step. His heart yearned for something even greater, something not only about financial stability, but about living fully in abundance. He had learned that the human mind, when aligned with the right feeling, had unlimited power. That's why he decided to intensify his law of attraction practices even further. His old notebook entries transformed into bold plans. Now he wrote not only about the desire for stability, but about the vision of a life rich in experiences, travel, healthy relationships, and even personal projects that could impact others. Sometimes internal voices still arose, trying to discourage him. "Who are you to want so much?" his mind whispered on lonely nights. But unlike in the past, Michael no longer let these thoughts dominate him. He learned to observe without attachment. He told himself, "These doubts are not who I am. They are just echoes of a past that no longer defines me." And as he repeated this new narrative, he felt increasingly stronger. The results came impressively. A few months after being hired, Michael was called to lead a special project within the company. It wasn't just recognition of his skills, but a chance to demonstrate leadership, creativity, and vision. He took a deep breath, accepted the challenge, and gave himself fully. The days were intense, but instead of feeling overwhelmed, he felt excitement. Each obstacle seemed like a reminder that he was growing. During this period, a new passion emerged in his life, sharing his own story. Once, in a casual conversation with colleagues, he spoke about how he had spent years in scarcity, struggling to pay rent and going to bed unsure if he would have food the next day. Everyone fell silent, attentive, almost unable to believe that the confident, smiling man before them had once lived that reality. Some were moved to tears. A colleague remarked, "Michael, you need to share this more. Your story could inspire so many people." These words resonated in his mind. Perhaps his purpose was greater than simply attaining abundance for himself. Perhaps it was time to multiply it, to show others that it was possible too. He didn't know where to start, but he began writing accounts on a simple blog, just as an open journal. Without expecting it, within weeks, dozens of people started reading, commenting, and thanking him. At the same time, the universe seemed to open doors in every area of his life. Financially, he no longer had to worry about overdue bills. He had savings, plans, and even the freedom to afford small luxuries that once seemed impossible. But more than money, it was the feeling that his mind was expanding, that he was learning to play a new game, the game of abundance. During this phase, Michael also began dedicating himself to self-discovery more deeply. He studied spirituality, read books by masters on the creative mind, meditated daily, and kept gratitude as the foundation of everything. In every small detail of daily life, he found reasons to be thankful. The morning sun, a stranger's smile, the delicious food on his plate, the comfortable bed at night. These practices, although simple, completely changed the way he perceived reality. But like any journey, tests arose. At one point, the company faced staff cuts due to internal adjustments, and Michael for a moment felt fear rise again. Would he lose everything he had achieved? Would he fall back into the pit? His heart raced, past memories threatened to resurface. But instead of succumbing, he took a deep breath and repeated his affirmations. I am abundance. The universe always conspires in my favor. If something leaves my life, it's only to make space for something even better. Days later came the surprise. He not only kept his job, but was promoted to a leadership role in the project he was working on. It was as if the universe had tested his faith, only to reward him when he chose to believe. This promotion brought not just a significant salary increase, but also renewed confidence in himself and his path. With this new phase, Michael began investing in his own parallel dreams. He had always wanted to write a book about his story of overcoming challenges, but he had previously seen it as distant. Now, with the right energy, he began dedicating a few hours each week to writing. With each page, he felt not only that he was reliving his journey, but also transforming it, a legacy. His personal life also flourished. The man who had once lived in solitude began attracting new friendships, people aligned with his energy who shared similar values. He no longer accepted superficial or toxic relationships. He had learned to value his own energy, set boundaries, and say no when something didn't align with his desires. This naturally meant that only people vibrating at the same frequency remained in his life. One of these connections became special. Amid new friendships, she met someone who also believed in the power of the mind, the strength of gratitude, and the value of authenticity. It was as if they recognized each other on a similar journey, each bringing unique lessons. The relationship that flourished between them was not based on need or fear, but on complicity and mutual growth. For the first time, Michael felt he was living a love that strengthened rather than drained him. All of this led him to a profound sense of mission. He no longer wanted to simply achieve for himself. He wanted to show the world that the law of attraction was not a fairy tale, but a real tool for transformation. That's why he intensified his efforts to share his experiences. He created simple videos, gave talks in small communities, and was even invited for a podcast interview. He always spoke with authenticity, never trying to convince anyone, just sharing how he had experienced the transition from scarcity to abundance. These experiences deeply touched him, because in every emotional gaze of the audience, in every thank you message he received, Michael realized that his pain had transformed into purpose. And that's what made his life truly abundant. Not only material wealth or stability, but the opportunity to touch hearts, to spark hope in people who, like him once, believed they had no way out. Michael's journey was only expanding. If before his dream was to get out of debt and achieve stability, now he dreamed of impacting lives around the world. He dreamed of creating social projects, writing more books, traveling to inspire people in different places. And with every step, the universe continued to respond. He had understood once and for all that abundance is not only about having, but about being. Being abundant in gratitude, love, generosity, and faith. Being someone who believes even when everything seems against them. Being someone who understands that every challenge is merely an opportunity to grow. And one night, lying on the ceiling of his apartment, now very different from the old empty room, Michael Lawson smiled. He knew there was still much to achieve, but he also knew he already had everything. He had peace, purpose, and love, and that was more than any wealth could ever offer.
Michael Lawson was no longer the man sinking in debt and nights of despair. The transformation that had begun with small practices of gratitude and visualization was now expanding in remarkable ways. Every choice, every action, and every thought were aligned with what he truly desired for his life.
Abundance was no longer a distant concept. It had become a tangible reality, manifesting in unexpected and powerful ways. In the days following his promotion at work, Michael began dreaming even bigger. He realized that the true power of the law of attraction was not just in solving immediate problems, but in creating a life that once seemed impossible. He began writing down his most ambitious goals, detailing every aspect: career, finances, relationships, health, and impact on the world. He wrote each item with precision, already feeling it as reality. Each goal had a timeline, but more importantly, it had emotion. He didn't just wish for it, he felt as though he already possessed it. The first major manifestation happened in his career. An executive from another company, whom he met casually at a networking conference, offered him an independent consulting proposal. It was a challenging, lucrative, and high-visibility project, something he would never have imagined months earlier when his only concern had been paying the bills. By accepting it, Michael felt a wave of confidence and recognition. The universe seemed to reaffirm his ability to create opportunities. With professional success came new financial opportunities. Investments he had studied and applied carefully began to yield beyond expectations. Every victory, no matter how small, reinforced his belief in his own ability to attract what he desired. Michael knew the secret was not only in external actions, but in the consistency of his mindset and the clarity of his intentions. Michael's personal life also flourished in extraordinary ways. Connections that had once been superficial now transformed into deep, meaningful relationships. He surrounded himself with people vibrating on the same frequency, who supported his dreams and shared his vision of abundance. Among these people, his relationship with his partner became an example of mutual support and growth. They not only shared moments of joy, but also cultivated emotional support and daily inspiration. Michael also decided to expand his influence. He began leading workshops and giving talks on overcoming challenges, positive mindset, and the law of attraction. Each event gathered more people, and he was amazed at the impact his story had. Some feedback was moving. People who had lost hope found in Michael's words the motivation to change their own lives. He understood, more than ever, that his purpose went beyond personal achievements. It was to help others realize their own potential. A memorable moment occurred when Michael was invited to participate in a local radio program to share his journey. During the interview, he described his life of scarcity, moments of despair, and how gratitude, visualization, and focus practices transformed his reality. Listener messages began to pour in, with people sharing similar experiences and thanking him for the inspiration. For Michael, that recognition was not about fame, but the certainty that he was fulfilling his purpose. Michael's health and well-being also reflected his evolution. He maintained a balanced routine of exercise, healthy eating, and daily meditation. Every aspect of his body and mind seemed in harmony with the life he was building. The energy that was once limited and fatigued was now abundant, and Michael realized that this also influenced his ability to create opportunities and attract positive experiences. Furthermore, gratitude became an even deeper practice. He not only gave thanks for achievements already realized, but also for those on the way. Every morning, before even leaving the bed, he felt a sense of positive anticipation, visualizing a day full of accomplishments, connections, and happy moments. This habit reinforced his alignment with the energy of abundance, and he began noticing that life seemed to respond instantly to this inner state. Opportunities continued to multiply in unexpected ways. Side projects began generating additional income, international trips appeared as spontaneous gifts, and experiences that once seemed distant were now realized with ease. Each achievement was not just material, but filled with learning, emotion, and purpose. Michael knew he was living the life he had always desired, and the deep sense of gratitude made each victory even more meaningful. Emotionally, Michael also experienced profound transformations. He had learned to face challenges without being discouraged, to trust the flow of life, and to maintain a positive outlook even in the face of obstacles. Problems that would have paralyzed him before were now approached with clarity, strategy, and calmness. He understood that the true power of the law of attraction is not only in attracting good things, but in cultivating inner strength to handle any situation in a balanced and productive way. One day, while reviewing his goals and achievements, Michael felt a sense of complete fulfillment. He looked at his life and realized that from absolute despair, he had reached a state of abundance that went far beyond the material. He had purpose, a positive influence on others, meaningful relationships, health, financial and emotional freedom. But above all, he felt a deep connection to his own essence and to the universe. And at this point in his journey, Michael realized something fundamental. The scarcity that once defined him had not been an obstacle, but a preparation. Every challenge, every hopeless night, every doubt had built the resilience, clarity, and strength necessary to manifest an extraordinary life. He understood that the power to transform his reality had always been within him, and the law of attraction was merely the mechanism that allowed him to materialize what he already felt was possible. Now, Michael Lawson lived fully. Every sunrise was an opportunity to create, love, learn, and expand. He knew the future would still bring challenges, but he had absolute confidence that he could face them with the same faith, clarity, and gratitude that had brought him to this point. His life was not only a reflection of realized desires, but a living proof that anyone, regardless of their starting point, could transform their reality by aligning thoughts, emotions, and actions with what they truly desired.
Michael Lawson gazed at the horizon with a serene yet deeply emotional smile. Every step he had taken, every challenge he had faced, every practice of gratitude and visualization had led him to this point, a life of complete abundance, emotional balance, and true purpose. He was no longer just the man who confronted scarcity, fear, and doubt. He was living proof that the universe responds when you choose to align your thoughts, feelings, and actions with what you truly desire. Over the years, Michael had experienced a series of profound transformations. What began as small signs, a note found on the ground, a friend offering an opportunity, a job that seemed unattainable, now manifested into grand realities. He was living not only in financial prosperity, but also in emotional, spiritual, and social abundance. Every aspect of his life reflected the harmony between his desires and his unwavering faith. He vividly remembered the dark nights when he sat alone, crying at the harsh reality of his circumstances. It seemed impossible to imagine that one day he would have the freedom to create, share, and impact lives meaningfully. But the journey had taught him that every difficulty was an invitation to strengthen his faith, to deepen his connection with himself and the universe. And more than ever, he understood that scarcity was not a punishment, but an opportunity to awaken the true power that already existed within him. The first major milestone of this new phase was the realization of a project he had always dreamed of, launching an online platform to help people transform their lives using the law of attraction. Michael invested time, energy, and love into this project, creating content, workshops, and programs that taught the principles that had guided him. The response was immediate and remarkable. People from all over the world began participating, sharing their stories, and finding inspiration in his journey. Michael realized that by elevating his own life, he was helping others elevate theirs. At the same time, new opportunities emerged in his professional career. Invitations to international talks, consulting for renowned companies, and creative collaborations multiplied. He never had to chase anything. Everything seemed to flow toward him naturally, as if life were adjusting to the frequency of his inner vibration. Michael understood that this was the true essence of the law of attraction. Not forcing, not struggling desperately, but maintaining internal alignment and allowing the universe to respond.
His personal life also reached a new level of fulfillment. The relationship he nurtured was based on respect, love, and mutual growth. He had trustworthy friends, people who shared similar values and celebrated his victories without envy or competition. Every meeting, conversation, and gesture of care or friendship was experienced with full awareness and gratitude. Michael knew that true wealth was not only in material possessions, but in deep and meaningful human connections. The impact of Michael's transformation began to be recognized publicly. News articles, interviews, and social media began sharing his story as an example of conscious manifestation and overcoming challenges. But even with all the visibility, he remained humble, always remembering the simple practices that had guided him: gratitude, visualization, aligned action, and unwavering faith. He knew that anyone could reach the same point as long as they believed and persisted. A defining moment came when Michael was invited to speak at an international conference on personal development. As he stepped onto the stage, he looked out at an audience eager for inspiration. He shared his journey from scarcity to abundance, detailing his lonely nights, doubts, mistakes, and the small manifestations that made him believe in transformation. Every word he spoke carried authenticity and emotion. The tears of some in the audience were proof that his story resonated deeply. Michael understood that the secret of manifestation was not just in desiring something material or achieving financial success. True power lay in transforming oneself internally, raising one's energy, aligning with feelings of gratitude, love, and trust, and maintaining clarity about what one truly wanted. He had learned that thoughts generate emotions, emotions generate actions, and actions create tangible results in reality. Every achievement he now enjoyed was the result of this conscious sequence, built with discipline and faith. In his daily life, Michael continued to practice gratitude intensely. Every morning upon waking, he felt thankful for simply being alive, for the opportunities that arose, for the relationships he cultivated, and for the experiences he enjoyed. This constant practice not only strengthened his vibrational alignment, but also amplified his perception of abundance at all levels. He knew that the more grateful he was, the more signs and opportunities the universe would place in his path. International trips, encounters with inspiring people, successful projects, and financial freedom were just external manifestations of something much greater: the expansion of his consciousness. Michael became increasingly aware of his own power to create reality. He realized that life was not happening to him, but for him, and that every experience, whether good or challenging, had a purpose. But the most transformative realization was that Michael no longer needed to struggle to earn or prove anything. He understood that abundance is a state of being. He already possessed everything he needed internally: confidence, self-love, clarity, gratitude, and faith. External events were reflection of this inner reality. By embracing this awareness, his life flowed naturally and harmoniously, without effort or anxiety. One day, while walking through the city, Michael felt a profound sense of peace and fulfillment. He had reached levels that once seemed unattainable, but the greatest achievement was not in possessions or external opportunities. It was in the freedom to live fully, the sense of purpose, and the ability to positively impact the lives of so many people. He knew that anyone could achieve the same, as long as they were willing to transform their mind, align their emotions, and believe unwaveringly. And so, Michael Lawson became a living example of the law of attraction in action. The journey that began at rock bottom, with nights of despair and absolute scarcity, had transformed into a life of complete abundance, elevated purpose, and positive impact on the world. He not only achieved his dreams, but also inspired thousands of people to believe in their own power to create the reality they desire. At the end of that day, sitting on his balcony watching the sunset, Michael closed his eyes and breathed deeply. He knew that every challenge faced, every night of uncertainty, every step taken with faith had been necessary to build the person he had become. A smile formed on his face. He was alive, free, fulfilled, and deeply grateful. The life he had always imagined was not only possible, it was real, tangible, and extraordinary. And now it's your turn to reflect. Are you ready to believe that everything you desire can manifest in your life? That every thought, emotion, and action can transform your reality? That scarcity is not a destiny, but merely an opportunity to awaken your true power? Michael Lawson proved it's possible, and now it's up to you to take the first step. If you've watched this far, leave in the comments a word that represents Michael Lawson's story, and share what inspired you most about this journey. I want to know your thoughts and how you plan to apply the law of attraction in your own life.